Please take a moment to enjoy this gripping, suspenseful, and mysterious story. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing the lesson you took away from it. He used to be one of the most powerful men in Silicon Valley. Jonathan Reed, CEO of Reed Tech, a multi-billion-dollar tech empire. And that morning, everything seemed under control. Until he realized the translator wasn't coming. Across the conference table, 3 Middle Eastern investors, representatives of a billion-dollar investment fund, were growing visibly impatient. In less than 60 seconds, a $350 million deal began to unravel, and with it, the image of an empire. In the corner of the room, near the marble staircase, Amina, a black housemaid, was still wiping the railing, her hands smelling of disinfectant. She had worked there for almost 2 years. Not once had anyone asked for her full name. Not once had anyone said, "Good morning." But today, she heard everything. Every insult, every cold order, every frantic call for an Arabic translator. "No one can get here in under 30 minutes, Jonathan's assistant stammered. "This isn't some high school presentation. This is a $350 million deal." Jonathan shouted, clutching his phone, calling every contact, threatening to fire the whole team. Meanwhile, Amina remained still, because stepping into that room would mean setting fire to the cloak of invisibility she had worn to survive. Jonathan threw a chair. "This is falling apart." And then Amina spoke. She was still holding her cleaning rag, but her eyes were no longer on the floor. They were locked onto the powerful man who had never looked at her for more than a second. "I can translate, sir." A wave of silence rolled through the room like a breath held too long. The blonde Ivy League assistant blinked. Bianca, the personal aide, almost laughed. Jonathan turned, frowning. "You're the maid, right?" "Yes, but I'm fluent in classical Arabic and Gulf dialects. My father taught linguistics in Khartoum." One of the investors nodded and said something in Arabic. Amina replied instantly, fluent, calm. Smiles formed on their faces. Jonathan blinked in disbelief. "You're joking." Amina met his eyes. "No, but you're gambling with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." He said nothing. Ego battled fear. Then he nodded. "Sit. Don't mess this up." Amina took the empty chair beside the investors, rag still in hand. But from the very first sentence, she was no longer the maid. She was the beating heart holding the meeting together. She translated like a scalpel, precise, sharp, and smooth like wind cutting through a storm. Not a single pause. Not a single mistake. Mr. Al-Mansour says if clear communication isn't possible, he prefers to postpone the meeting. Amina translated with neutral tone and careful diplomacy. Jonathan looked at her as if he were witnessing a ghost stepping out of the wall and becoming real. "We're ready to begin now," he said. Amina nodded and delivered the message with grace. One of the older investors asked a question, his tone skeptical. She responded fluently, adding cultural context, softening his tone, and correcting a small error in their material, all in one breath. Jonathan sat frozen, eyes wide. This wasn't luck. This was mastery. Bianca stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, her face tightening with each compliment Amina received in a language she couldn't understand. "What did he just say?" Jonathan whispered. "He liked your proposal, but he wants to revise a clause about intellectual property." "You caught that?" "Yes. I understand more than you think, Mr. Reed." Jonathan looked at her, and in his eyes, not pity, not surprise, just respect, and maybe a flicker of shame. The meeting found its rhythm. Tension faded. The investors began to nod, to smile. One of them offered Amina a bottle of water, a small but powerful gesture of dignity. 2 hours later, the $350 million deal was officially closed. "Thank you, Ms. Amina," said the eldest investor, then turned to Jonathan. "We consider you trustworthy." Because of her. As the room emptied, Jonathan remained in his seat, stunned. Amina quietly gathered her notes. The cleaning rag still sat beside them. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. "From life. And from rooms where no one expected anything from me." He didn't reply. For the first time, He didn't know what to say. In the kitchen, Bianca was already reviewing the security footage. Her fingers hovered above her keyboard, and her next move wouldn't be quiet. The next morning, the mansion looked the same. Polished marble floors, lavish paintings on the walls, imported Italian vases. But the air had changed. Not because of sunlight, not because of the glowing success of yesterday's deal, but because of one thing. Amina. She arrived early, like every other day. But this time, the glances that used to pass through her like she didn't exist began to stop. On the staircase, in the kitchen, out by the garden, they looked at her, not as a maid, but as a variable they couldn't predict. At the far end of the upstairs hallway, Bianca was waiting, leaning casually against the banister. She smiled, but her eyes were sharp as silk hiding steel. "Good morning, Amina," she said sweetly, too sweetly. "Good morning, Ms. Bianca," Amina replied, voice calm, perfectly balanced. "You seem special today. A day to remember, huh?" Bianca tilted her head, smile still fixed. Amina returned a faint smile. Sometimes, one day is enough to change everything, especially when it's earned. Bianca's jaw tightened. Her heels clicked away down the hall, like warning knocks on marble. That afternoon, Jonathan called Amina into his study. He was no longer the cold businessman. His shirt was unbuttoned to the collar, his tie loose. His eyes were direct, tired but honest. "I just got off the phone with the investors," he said. "They want you in all upcoming meetings." Amina raised an eyebrow. "As a translator?" Jonathan shook his head. "No, they want you as the international liaison officer." She sat down slowly. "And your team? How will they react?" "They'll accept it. Or they can leave," he said without hesitation. Amina nodded, watching him. "Do you trust me, or are you just trying to save your deal?" Jonathan paused. "Maybe both. But I saw something in you yesterday, and I can't pretend I didn't." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll do it, but I have one condition." "Name it." "No more uniform. And I'm not using the back entrance again." Jonathan sighed, then smiled, genuinely for the first time. "Deal." That evening, Amina walked through the main hall. The marbles still shone, but her steps were different. No longer the steps of someone trying not to be seen. They were the steps of a woman walking into the space she had earned. Downstairs in the print room, Bianca held a contract. Her face was blank. On the page, a small, nearly invisible clause, written in Arabic. Just one vague sentence about intellectual property rights on foreign territory. "She's smart," Bianca whispered, narrowing her eyes. "Let's see if she's smart enough to catch this." 3 days later, at Reed Tech HQ, Amina, now officially Layla Omar, entered the glass atrium with a new ID badge. Low black heels, a tailored suit. No uniform. No back door. On the 14th floor, the 3 Middle Eastern investors were already seated, ready for round 2. Jonathan entered, serious. But when Layla stepped into the room, all 3 investors stood and smiled. "Miss Layla," said the oldest in warm Arabic, "it's truly a pleasure to see you again." The meeting began. Layla didn't just translate. She led. She adjusted tone, softened cultural tensions, corrected translation errors in the slide deck. Not a single detail escaped her. Jonathan watched her, not with surprise this time, but with respect. Downstairs, Bianca stared at a printed contract, her eyes narrowing. The clause she had slipped in had already been submitted. Upstairs, one investor handed Layla a new draft. She scanned it quickly, then paused. Her eyes narrowed. Her fingers traced a line that didn't exist in the English version. "Mr. Al-Fahim," she said calmly, "there's a serious error in this clause." Jonathan leaned forward. "What kind of error?" "If left unchanged, this clause gives Reed Tech full patent ownership over any inventions developed in the Middle East. That violates our verbal agreement." A chill swept through the room. "You're sure?" "I'm certain, but give me 5 minutes and I can correct it and explain clearly." Jonathan gave a small nod. Layla turned to the investors and spoke in Arabic, clear, honest, direct. She didn't just fix the document. She restored their trust. When the meeting ended, the oldest investor placed his hand gently on the table and smiled. You don't work for him. He exists because you are here. Jonathan chuckled softly, because it was absolutely true. At that very moment, Bianca received an email. Subject: Internal review requested. Please report to HR immediately. 3 days later, the $350 million deal was signed. Just a quiet announcement. No photos, no headlines. But behind it was a silent revolution. Reed Tech had officially entered the Middle East. Not just with money, but with trust and respect, earned through the voice of someone who once was invisible. And at the center of it all was Layla. She walked down the halls of her new office, lights reflecting off the glass walls, and people's eyes changed. Some smiled, some whispered, some still didn't know how to adjust to her new role. The word Maid had disappeared. On her office door now read, Layla Omar, International Communications Director. No more uniform. No more side entrances. No more asking for permission to belong. She belonged here. At exactly 3 p.m., the internal intercom buzzed. Layla, can you come to my office for a moment? Jonathan was standing by the window, back turned, holding a thick folder of documents. They're launching a new research hub in the Gulf, he said. They've requested you to be there in person for 3 months, to meet, represent, and lay the foundation. Layla tilted her head. In person? Not on Zoom. No, they want you as the bridge, the face of the partnership. She stayed silent for a moment, then asked, Are you sending me because I'm good at what I do, or because you're trying to prove something to yourself? Jonathan turned. No denial. Both. He stepped closer, looking her in the eyes. You changed the deal. You changed this company. And you changed me. Layla didn't look away. Then if I go, my sister goes with me. She's stable now, but I won't leave her behind. Jonathan nodded immediately. Of course. Whatever you need. That night, Layla sat alone on the balcony of a high-rise hotel in Abu Dhabi. Her sister, Hannah, slept peacefully inside. For the first time in years, Layla felt like she could breathe, not to survive, but to simply live. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jonathan. Are you okay? Really? Layla replied. I feel at peace. He responded almost instantly. I've been trying to figure out who I was before I met you, and why I let that version of me last so long. In the days that followed, their texts grew longer, from business to life, from strategy to quiet midnight reflections, like they were rewriting what it meant to connect. One night, he called. I know it's late, but when you're back, I'd like to take you somewhere. Don't tell me it's a 5-star restaurant with $10 bottled water. Jonathan laughed. No, it's where I grew up. It's not pretty, but it's real. Layla smiled. You're changing, Jonathan. He exhaled slowly. You make me want to be better. Not for anyone's approval. Just because I finally want to. The next day, Layla was invited to a private ceremony. The eldest investor handed her a small pendant engraved in Arabic. Wisdom and courage. You didn't just translate our language, he said. You translated our hearts, from us to them, and from them to us. 2 years later, the building that once read Reed Tech now bore a new name. Reed and Omar International. A new empire, built on 2 ends that once felt worlds apart. Power and the hunger to be heard. Layla no longer wore an ID badge. Her name was on global policy, on panels, on international initiatives. But today, she stood on the grounds where it all began, the mansion where she used to scrub floors. Now, it was the Layla Omar Foundation, a leadership institute for girls of color, immigrant youth, and forgotten dreamers. In the garden, a little girl came running. Miss Layla, I have an idea. Would you read it for me? Layla knelt down, her eyes soft. Of course, sweetheart. Show me everything. The world needs your voice. Jonathan stood nearby, quietly watching. Do you remember the first time you really saw me? Layla asked. You're holding a rag, he said, but it felt like you were carrying something so much bigger. I was carrying a storm, she answered. He nodded. I used to think, if the translator hadn't canceled that day, you'd still have signed the deal, Layla cut in, and I'd still be scrubbing bathrooms, and none of this would exist. She turned to him. Do you know why it all changed? What? Because when someone like me walks into a room they were never invited to and stays, the world has no choice but to rearrange itself around that truth. Jonathan looked at her. No guilt, no pity, just deep, humbled awe. Layla looked back toward the garden. The wind lifted strands of her hair. You still think I was just a lucky maid? Jonathan shook his head slowly. You were the revolution.